Ilara never imagined her life would change because of a single mistake. A splash of ice, a shattered silence, a room full of wealthy eyes turning toward her. In seconds, the invisible waitress became the center of a disaster that cost her job, and nearly her hope. But the next morning, the impossible happened. A black envelope, no stamp, her name written in silver, summoned her to the headquarters of the man who watched her humiliation unfold. Billionaire Damien Sterling. What could he possibly want with her? Why would someone who moved billions care about a woman struggling to buy her sister's medication? Ilara didn't know. But that meeting would open the door to buried secrets, stolen fortunes, and a truth powerful enough to destroy an entire legacy. One single moment can change everything. For Ilara, that moment arrived not with a thunderclap, but with the quiet, devastating splash of ice water. The ballroom of the Grand Majestic Hotel was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and whispered conversations about wealth and influence. Women in silk gowns laughed like tinkling bells, and men in sharp tuxedos discussed stocks and investments as if they were trading baseball cards. Their collective net worth could have erased the debt of a small nation. For Ilara, balancing a heavy silver tray, it was just another world she was paid to serve, but never to enter. Her mind wasn't on the champagne or the canapes. It was on the crumpled, pink eviction notice tucked inside her worn-out purse and the rising cost of the medication that kept her younger sister, Lily, breathing steadily through the night. Her feet ached in her thin-soled shoes, a dull throb that had become a constant companion during these long shifts. She moved through the crowd, a ghost in a black-and-white uniform, invisible to the titans of industry and their elegant partners. Her focus frayed for just a second. A careless guest stepped back without looking, his elbow jarring her arm. The heavy pitcher of ice water tilted, a slow-motion catastrophe. Time seemed to warp as the crystalline vessel left her tray, arcing through the air before connecting with the chest of the one man in the room nobody dared to approach. The pitcher shattered on the marble floor, but the real damage was done by the frigid water that soaked the front of a bespoke $1,000 suit. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. The symphony of chatter ceased, replaced by a silence so profound it was deafening. Ilara's eyes followed the dark, spreading stain up to the face of its owner, Damien Sterling. He wasn't just a rich man. He was a legend. A billionaire whispered about in tones of awe and fear, a man who had built an empire from nothing, whose fortune was a complex web of stocks, bonds, and shadowy ventures in cryptocurrency that few could comprehend. He was known for his ruthless business acumen and an emotional temperature that matched the ice water now dripping from his lapel. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, locked onto hers. There was no anger in them, no shouting. There was something far worse, a cold, complete dismissal. It was the look one gives an insect before crushing it underfoot. Ilara stood frozen, trembling. I'm so sorry, sir. The words died in her throat. The hotel manager, a man whose smile was usually plastered on his face, was suddenly at her side, his expression a mask of panic. He didn't even look at her. His entire being was focused on appeasing the Titan. Mr. Sterling, my deepest apologies. This is inexcusable, absolutely inexcusable. He turned to Ilara, his voice a venomous whisper. You're fired. Get your things and get out. Now! Each word was a physical blow. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She was no longer a person, just a problem to be removed. Without another word, she turned and walked away. She could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on her back, the cold judgment of the wealthy, the pity, the scorn. She didn't look back. She walked through the opulent lobby, past the fountains and the fresh flowers, and out into the unforgiving chill of the city night. The door swinging shut behind her felt like the closing of a tomb. Her meager lifeline, the job that barely kept her and Lily afloat, was gone, wrecked in a single, mortifying splash. The walk home was a blur of tears and despair. How would she pay the rent? How would she afford Lily's next prescription? Her world, already so fragile, had just shattered into a million pieces. The next day passed in a fog of anxiety. Ilara sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the bills she couldn't pay, the weight of her failure a physical presence in the room. She felt hollowed out, defeated. Just as she was about to surrender to the crushing despair, a sharp rap on the door startled her. It was a courier, holding a sleek black envelope. It bore no stamp, just her name and address printed in elegant silver script. Her heart pounded as she opened it. The paper inside was thick and expensive, embossed with the logo of a company she recognized from the financial news. Sterling Enterprises. The message was brief, typed, and utterly baffling. It was a summons. Mr. Damien Sterling requested her presence at his corporate headquarters. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Sharp. No explanation, no reason, just a command. Why would the man whose evening she had ruined, the man who had watched her get fired without a flicker of emotion, want to see her? The question hung in the air, a terrifying, impossible sliver of hope in the suffocating darkness. The next morning, that sliver of hope felt more like a shard of glass in her gut. Ilara stood before the Sterling Enterprises headquarters, a skyscraper of black glass and steel that seemed to pierce the heavens, a monument to a level of wealth she could barely comprehend. It was a physical manifestation of Damien Sterling's power, a fortress built from shrewd investments and a fortune so vast it was measured in billions of dollars. Not just cash, but a complex portfolio of stocks, bonds, and digital assets like Bitcoin. She clutched her worn purse, the expensive black envelope feeling like a forgery in her hands. Every person who swept past her through the revolving doors looked like they belonged, their confidence and armor she had never owned. Taking a deep breath that did little to calm her racing heart, she walked inside. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate power. The air was cool and smelled faintly of leather and money. A silence hung in the vast space, broken only by the soft clicks of keyboards and the whisper of expensive shoes on polished marble. It felt less like an office and more like a high-tech vault where capital was the reigning deity. When she gave her name to the receptionist, the woman's perfectly arched eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch, a silent question in her eyes, but the name was on the list. A silent security guard escorted her to a private elevator that ascended with stomach-lurching speed, the city shrinking below into a map of her own struggles. Damien Sterling's office was on the top floor. It was less an office and more a minimalist kingdom, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the world he owned. There was no clutter, no personal photos, just a large desk of dark wood, a sleek laptop, and the man himself, standing and looking out at the city. He turned as she entered, his expression as unreadable as it had been at the gala. He wore a simple grey sweater and dark trousers, yet he seemed more imposing here, in his own domain, than he had in a tuxedo. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice calm and devoid of emotion. He didn't offer her a seat. "Thank you for coming." Ilara's hands were clammy. You summoned me, sir." He nodded, his eyes appraising her. "I did. The events at the gala were unfortunate." He said it like a weather report, a statement of fact with no emotional weight. "You were fired. That was not my directive, but the hotel manager's overzealous attempt to placate me." She stared, confused. "I don't understand." "Most people in your position would have groveled," he continued. Ignoring her confusion, they would have wept, begged, made a scene. You didn't. You accepted the consequence and left with a shred of dignity. That is a rare commodity. It's efficient. The word hung in the air, cold and strange. Efficient dignity. He spoke of human emotion as if it were a line item on a balance sheet. "I have a proposition for you," he said, finally moving to his desk but still not sitting. "I require a temporary personal assistant for a special project. It is sensitive and requires absolute discretion. Ilara's mind reeled. A job from him. A personal assistant? Sir, with all due respect, my only experience is in food service. I'm not hiring you for your experience, he cut in sharply. I'm hiring you for the quality I observed 2 nights ago. Honesty and desperation. Desperate people are often the most motivated. His gaze was so intense, it felt like he was performing an audit on her soul, calculating her assets and liabilities. My late mother established a charitable foundation, the Sterling Hope Foundation. It has a significant endowment, a vast portfolio of assets designed to generate income for its work. However, I have come to believe there are inefficiencies, funds that are not reaching their intended recipients. I want you to help me find them. He was asking her, a fired waitress, to investigate the inner workings of his family's multi-million-dollar charity. It made no sense. Why me? She whispered. Because you are an outsider, he stated simply. You have no allegiances, no preconceived notions. You see the world from the ground up, not from the top down like everyone else in this building. You will be my eyes and ears. Your tasks will be whatever I require. The pay will be enough to solve your immediate financial problems, and then some. Do you accept? Her mind screamed no. It felt like a trap, a bizarre game being played by a man who had more money than he knew what to do with. But then, an image of Lily's pale face, of the eviction notice, of the empty pharmacy bottle on their counter flashed through her mind. Desperation, he had said. He was right, she had no other options. Her pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yes, she said, her voice firmer than she expected. I accept. A flicker of something, perhaps approval, crossed his face before vanishing. Good. My executive assistant will handle your paperwork. You start immediately. And just like that, Ilara was thrust into a world she didn't understand. Her first day was a blur of sterile white hallways, hushed conference rooms, and the suspicious stares of employees in designer suits. She was given a small, functional desk in an open-plan office, a world away from Damien's penthouse suite. Her first task was not to investigate complex financial records or uncover corporate deceit. It was to sort through 3 years' worth of paper donation receipts and file them alphabetically. It was a menial, mind-numbing task, clearly designed as a test of her resolve. As she sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of immense wealth being generated, she felt the cold, appraising gaze of a woman across the room. A polished, elegant woman with a predatory smile who looked at Ilara not as a colleague, but as a piece of dirt that had been tracked into her pristine world. The battle had begun, and Ilara didn't even know the rules of the game. That woman was Victoria Davenport. Her name was whispered in the office with a mixture of envy and resentment. She was the daughter of one of Damien's board members, a socialite whose life was a carefully curated series of charity galas and exclusive vacations. More importantly, it was an open secret that she was positioning herself to be the future Mrs. Sterling. She moved through the corporate world of Sterling Enterprises not as an employee, but as its presumptive queen. She glided over to Ilara's desk, the click of her designer heels a sharp counterpoint to the office's quiet hum. She looked down at the mountain of paper Ilara was meticulously sorting, a faint condescending smile playing on her lips. Still playing with paper, I see, Victoria said, her voice smooth as silk but laced with venom. Damien has such interesting hobbies, rescuing stray kittens, hiring waitresses. It's all part of his complex portfolio of charitable investments, I suppose. Ilara's cheeks burned, but she refused to give Victoria the satisfaction of a reaction. She kept her eyes on her work. I'm just doing the job I was hired for, she replied evenly. Victoria laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her cold eyes. Of course, you are dear. Just remember your place. With a final, dismissive glance, she swept away, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and a trail of icy hostility in her wake. The encounter solidified Ilara's resolve. She wasn't just a charity case. She was here to do a job. She plunged back into the receipts, but now with a new focus. She wasn't just filing papers. She was reading stories. Tucked between the formal donation slips were handwritten notes, pleas from community centers, letters from families. One described a leaking roof in a shelter for women, another, a request for art supplies for an after-school program in a rough neighborhood. She started noticing a disturbing pattern. The foundation would approve a grant, but the amount disbursed was often a fraction of what was needed, or the funds were allocated for administrative costs rather than the actual project. It felt less like inefficiency and more like a deliberate strangling of hope. Armed with a small stack of the most glaring examples, she requested a meeting with the foundation's manager, a man named Arthur Albright. He was the opposite of Damien Sterling, warm, avuncular, with a ready smile and a kind word for everyone. He welcomed Ilara into his plush office, offering her coffee and praise for her diligence. "My dear girl, this is excellent work," he said, glancing briefly at the files she presented. "Truly, but you must understand, a foundation of this size, with such a vast capital base, has layers of bureaucracy. These are likely just clerical errors, things that get lost in the shuffle. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. We'll get it sorted." He patted her hand in a fatherly gesture that felt deeply patronizing. "You just focus on the filing. That's where you can be most helpful." He was charmingly, utterly dismissive. He was a gatekeeper, and the gate was firmly closed. The next day, Victoria made her move. As Ilara was carefully cross-referencing a set of suspicious invoices, Victoria walked by her desk, feigning a stumble. A full cup of hot, black coffee went flying, cascading directly over Ilara's neat piles of paperwork, soaking the invoices and her handwritten notes. "Oh, you clumsy girl," Victoria exclaimed, looking at Ilara with mock horror. "Look what you made me do. This was a custom blend." She didn't offer to help, simply clicked her tongue in annoyance and walked away, leaving Ilara to stare at the ruined, dripping mess that represented days of painstaking work. The sabotage was so blatant, so childish, yet so effective. The other employees just looked down at their keyboards, refusing to meet her eyes. No one would dare cross Victoria Davenport. The humiliation was a bitter pill, but it was nothing compared to the phone call she received that evening. It was her neighbor, her voice tight with panic. Lily had had a severe asthma attack. She was in the hospital. Ilara rushed to the emergency room to find her sister small and pale in a hospital bed, hooked up to a breathing machine. The doctor explained that Lily's condition was worsening. There was a new experimental treatment, a series of injections that could make a real difference, but it was incredibly expensive. The cost he quoted was a staggering sum, an amount of money Ilara couldn't imagine earning in a year, let alone a few weeks. Suddenly, this job wasn't just about paying the rent, it was about Lily's next breath. The weight of that responsibility was immense, a physical pressure on her chest. The wealth she saw every day at Sterling Enterprises, the casual talk of stocks, dividends, and personal fortune, felt like a cruel joke. That world had the power to save her sister, and she was an unwelcome guest, sorting paper for a pittance. Desperation sharpened her focus. She couldn't afford to be dismissed by Albright or sabotaged by Victoria. The next day, she used her lunch break not to eat, but to act. She took a bus to one of the community centers she'd read about, a place that had supposedly received a large grant for building renovations, including a new wheelchair ramp. The center was worn, but full of life. When she asked the director about the new ramp, the woman gave a tired, bitter laugh. "Ramp, honey, we got enough money from that foundation to buy a new welcome mat and fix a broken window. They sent a photographer to take a picture of Mr. Albright handing me a giant check, but the actual deposit into our account was a tenth of that amount. When I called to complain, they buried me in paperwork. It was a publicity stunt, nothing more. Standing there, listening to the director's story, Ilara felt a cold dread mix with a hot surge of anger. This wasn't inefficiency. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a lie, a calculated, cruel deception built to maintain a public image, while the capital meant for helping people vanished into thin air. She finally understood the scope of the problem, and she knew that uncovering this truth would put her in the crosshairs of people far more powerful and ruthless than she could have ever imagined. That night, sleep offered no escape. Every time Ilara closed her eyes, she saw Lily's trusting face and the tired, disappointed eyes of the community center director. The knowledge of the deception was a heavy stone in her stomach. This wasn't just about missing capital or a flawed investment strategy. It was the theft of hope from the people who had the least to spare. She returned to the office the next day with a new, dangerous purpose. The menial task of filing receipts was now her cover. She worked with quiet intensity, her eyes scanning for anything out of place, any thread she could pull to unravel the whole rotten tapestry. She started staying late, long after the hum of the office had faded and the building settled into a deep, watchful silence. The skyscraper at night was an eerie place, a ghost of its daytime self, and she felt like a trespasser in a world of immense wealth she was never meant to understand. One evening, while cross-referencing a digital expense report with a box of old paper invoices from Arthur Albright's early years as manager, she found it a discrepancy so small it was almost invisible. A payment to a vendor for promotional materials was listed as $10,000 in the digital file, but the original paper invoice, tucked away and misfiled, showed the actual cost was only $1,000. The remaining $9,000 had been routed to a holding company she had never heard of, Davenport Holdings. The name sent a chill down her spine. Victoria Davenport. It couldn't be a coincidence. Fueled by adrenaline, she began a frantic search through the digital archives, using Davenport Holdings as her search term. Most files were encrypted, protected by layers of security, but in a forgotten subdirectory, nestled among old marketing plans, she found a single, unprotected file. It was a ledger, not an official one, but a private, parallel set of books. It was a meticulous record of siphoned funds, a shadow accounting of the foundation's business. For years, small amounts of money, disguised as administrative fees, vendor overpayments, and consulting charges, had been funneled away. The total was staggering, a fortune built from stolen charity, a vast accumulation of assets that should have built ramps, bought medicine, and funded dreams. It was the proof she needed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. This could save Lily and expose them all. She saved a copy to a small, encrypted flash drive she had bought with her own money. Her hands were shaking as she tucked it safely into her pocket. She would go to Damien Sterling first thing in the morning. He had to believe her. With this evidence, he would have no choice. She felt a surge of triumphant relief, a light at the end of a very dark tunnel. But she had underestimated the ruthlessness of her enemies. Victoria had been watching her. She had seen the late nights, the intense focus, and had grown suspicious. The next morning, before Ilara could even get to her desk, she was summoned, not to Damien's office, but to a sterile, intimidating conference room. Damien was there, his face a mask of cold fury. Victoria stood near him, looking concerned and sympathetic, a masterful performance of betrayed innocence. Two men from corporate security stood by the door. "Explain this," Damien said, his voice dangerously quiet. He slid a laptop across the polished table. On the screen was an email, sent from Ilara's work account to a notorious tabloid journalist. The subject line read, "The Sterling family's dirty secret." The body of the email contained a fabricated story. accusing Damien of using the foundation as a personal slush fund to hide losses from bad investments in cryptocurrency. It was a lie, but a plausible, damaging one. Attached to the email were bank statements showing a series of deposits into Ilara's personal bank account, totaling $50,000. Ilara stared at the screen, the blood draining from her face. I didn't write this. I've never seen this before in my life. Victoria stepped forward, her voice dripping with false pity. Damien, I saw her working late. I thought she was just being diligent. I never imagined to think we let her get so close. Damien's eyes were like chips of ice. The trust he had tentatively placed in her, that fragile connection built on her efficient dignity, had been vaporized. He saw only a calculated betrayal, a desperate woman who had seen an opportunity to leverage her position for a quick, dirty profit. The security logs show the email was sent from your terminal last night at 10:47 p.m., one of the security men said flatly. D. The bank transfers were made from an offshore account over the last 2 weeks. It was a perfect frame, airtight and devastating. She had been so focused on finding their lies that she never saw the one they were building around her. This is a setup, she pleaded, looking directly at Damien. Victoria, Arthur Albright, they're the ones stealing the money. I have proof. She reached for the flash drive in her pocket, but Damien held up a hand, stopping her. D, enough, he commanded, his voice cutting through the air. I gave you a chance, an opportunity, and you used it to try and blackmail me. He was furious, not just at the perceived betrayal, but at his own misjudgment. He had allowed a gut feeling to override his logic, and this was the result. He didn't fire her. That would have been too simple, too merciful. It also might have prompted her to go public with her fabricated story. Instead, he chose a different kind of punishment. You will not be returning to your desk, he said, his tone final. Your access to the Foundation's network is revoked. You will be escorted to the sub-level archives. Your new job is to sort and catalog 2 decades of physical records. You will not speak to anyone. You will work there until I decide what to do with you. It was a sentence of isolation, a corporate prison in a dusty basement. He was torn between the mountain of cold, hard evidence, and the faintest flicker of doubt, a gut feeling that refused to die. But the evidence was too strong. He had to protect his family's name and the legacy of his mother's foundation. As the security guards led her away, Ilara looked back at Damien, her eyes pleading, but he wouldn't meet her gaze. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into a tomb. The polished steel and soft lighting of the upper floors gave way to bare concrete and humming fluorescent tubes. The air grew colder, stale, thick with the smell of dust and forgotten paper. The sub-level archives were a labyrinth of towering metal shelves, groaning under the weight of 2 decades of history. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling, their labels faded, their contents a mystery of old contracts, financial reports, and event memorabilia. This was her prison, a dusty, silent cell designed to break her spirit. For the first few days, it worked. Ilara felt utterly defeated, buried alive under a mountain of paper and lies. The silence was the worst part. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that allowed her thoughts to scream. She saw Damien's cold, disappointed face, Victoria's triumphant smirk, and Lily's trusting eyes. Each memory was a turn of the screw. She was just a waitress, a nobody, who had dared to fly too close to the sun. And she had been burned, her wings turned to ash. She almost gave up. One afternoon, sitting on the cold floor, surrounded by the ghosts of the Sterling Hope Foundation's past, she felt a wave of despair so profound it almost drowned her. What was the point? They had already won. They had the power, the influence, the immense capital to create any reality they wanted. Her truth was worthless against their fortune. Just as she was about to let the darkness consume her, the security guard who brought her daily meager lunch appeared. "You have a phone call," he said, his voice flat. It was Lily. Her voice, crackling over the phone, was a lifeline. Unaware of the true horror of Ilara's situation, she was full of hope. "I told the doctor all about your new important job," Lily chirped. "I told him you're helping people and that when I get my new medicine, I'm going to draw a picture of your whole big office building." Ilara squeezed her eyes shut, a tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. Lily's unwavering faith was both a comfort and a gut punch. She couldn't let her down. She had to fight, not for vengeance, but for Lily's future. That phone call changed everything. The despair receded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The archives were no longer a prison. They were a puzzle. The answer had to be here somewhere, buried in the past. She began to work with a new, methodical fury, her hands moving through the old files, her mind sharp and focused. She wasn't just sorting, she was hunting. She started with the oldest boxes from the Foundation's inception. Inside one, beneath stacks of brittle financial statements, she found a collection of old photo albums. They were filled with pictures from the early days, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, charity auctions, smiling faces from a more hopeful time. As she turned a thick, yellowed page, a photograph made her stop. It was Damien's mother, a woman with a kind, radiant smile, standing next to a group of children at what looked like a community art fair. But it wasn't her face that captivated Ilara. It was the background. Behind her hung a large, hand-painted banner, and on it was a floral design of breathtaking intricacy, a unique, swirling pattern of lilies and vines, unlike anything she had ever seen, except she had. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hand flew to the simple, tarnished silver locket she always wore hidden beneath her shirt. It had been her grandmother's, the only thing of value she had ever owned. With trembling fingers, she unclasped it and opened the small, heart-shaped doors. There, engraved on the inside, was the exact same design, the swirling lilies, the delicate vines. It was a perfect match. A jolt went through her, a shock of impossible recognition. How could this be? Her grandmother had been a cleaner, a woman who had lived and died with nothing, possessing no assets beyond a few cherished trinkets. What possible connection could she have to the late matriarch of a billionaire family, a family whose wealth was a global tapestry of investments, real estate, and a vast portfolio of stocks and bonds? Meanwhile, floors above, in an office that overlooked the city, another investigation was beginning. Damien's older sister, Eleanor Sterling, stared at a confidential report on her desk. She was the iron guardian of the Sterling legacy, a woman who understood that their massive net worth wasn't just money, it was a dynasty to be protected. She found Damien's hiring of a random waitress to be an act of reckless sentimentality. "Find everything," she had ordered her head of security. "I want to know every person she's ever spoken to, every dollar she's ever owed. I'm convinced this girl is a grifter, and I want the proof to have her removed before she does real damage to our family's reputation and financial standing." She expected a file filled with red flags. What she was starting to find, however, was a story not of deceit, but of quiet, desperate integrity. But down in the basement, Ilara knew nothing of this. She stared at the photograph in one hand and the locket in the other. The two identical patterns stared back at her, a silent, impossible bridge between two completely different worlds. The fight was no longer just about exposing a crime. It had become personal. It was about uncovering the truth of her own past. This new knowledge ignited a fire in the ashes of her despair. The locket was no longer just a memento. It was a key. Her grandmother, a woman she remembered as quiet and hard-working, was now a figure of profound mystery. This connection to the Sterling family, to the very foundation of its charitable legacy, was a loose thread in the perfectly woven fabric of their lives. And Ilara was going to pull it until the entire thing unraveled. She retrieved the one personal item she'd been allowed to keep with her, a small, worn-out sketchbook and a single charcoal pencil. For years, she had viewed her art as a childish indulgence, a dream she couldn't afford to have when survival demanded every ounce of her energy. Now, it was her only weapon. She opened the book to a fresh page and began to draw. She sketched the intricate floral pattern from memory, her hand moving with a certainty that surprised her. Then she began to sketch the faces from the old photographs. She drew Damien's mother, capturing the warmth in her eyes. She drew the children, the donors, the board members. With each stroke of the charcoal, she felt like an archaeologist dusting off ancient bones, trying to reconstruct a life from fragments. She was building a timeline, a visual map of the Foundation's past, hoping to find where the truth had been buried. Hundreds of miles away, in a sleek corner office overlooking the city, Eleanor Sterling frowned at the report on her desk. The private investigator she had hired, a man known for his ability to unearth the most deeply buried secrets, had come up empty. "That's it?" Eleanor asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "A few late rent payments and a library fine from 3 years ago? This is what my investment in your services has yielded." The investigator, a stoic man in a plain suit, didn't flinch. "Ma'am, we've dug into every aspect of Ilara Vance's life. Financials, social media, personal connections. She has no hidden assets. No secret debts beyond medical bills for her sister. She has a reputation for being scrupulously honest. Her former employers describe her as one of the most reliable people they've ever had. She's not a grifter, she's just poor." The words hung in the air, an unwelcome truth. It didn't fit. The girl in this report, the one who worked double shifts to afford asthma medication for her sister, didn't align with the cunning blackmailer who had tried to extort $50,000 from her brother. Eleanor dismissed the investigator, her mind a whirl of contradictions. The evidence on the laptop was absolute, yet the story of this girl's life was a testament to integrity. For the first time, a seed of doubt was planted in her mind. What if they had all been played? Down in the archives, Ilara's attention was drawn to one recurring figure in the photographs, a younger Arthur Albright. In every picture, he was in the background just at the edge of the frame, his smile always a little too wide, his eyes always scanning the room. He was the constant shadow behind Mrs. Sterling's radiant light. Ilara sketched his face over and over, aging the lines, trying to reconcile the seemingly kind manager with the man who had patronizingly dismissed her concerns. Then she found the photograph that changed everything. It was from a summer garden party nearly 20 years ago. There, standing under a rose-covered trellis, was a teenage Victoria Davenport, beautiful and already imperious. Standing just behind her, with a hand resting lightly on her shoulder in a gesture that was both familiar and proprietary, was Arthur Albright. Ilara's charcoal flew across the page. She drew them together, capturing the angle of their jaws, the shape of their eyes. It wasn't just a manager and a board member's daughter. The resemblance, once isolated from the noise of the photograph, was unmistakable. They were family. A frantic search began. She abandoned the photo albums and started tearing through boxes of old event files, looking for anything that might confirm her suspicion. Finally, in a box marked Annual Donor Gala 1998, she found it, a seating chart. There, at table 7, were Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, their daughter Victoria, and a guest listed beside them, Mr. Arthur Albright, nephew. The word seemed to leap off the page. He was her uncle. The charming manager and the ruthless socialite were bound by blood. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place with breathtaking, terrifying clarity: the hidden ledger, the payments to Davenport Holdings. The systematic embezzlement wasn't just Albright's scheme. It was a family business. They had been siphoning the Foundation's capital for decades, turning a legacy of hope into their personal source of income. a secret stream of funds that bolstered their family's already considerable wealth. Victoria hadn't framed her simply to eliminate a romantic rival. She had done it to protect a criminal conspiracy, to silence the one person who had stumbled close enough to see the truth. Ilara leaned back against a cold metal shelf, the seating chart trembling in her hand. She was no longer just fighting for her job or her grandmother's memory. She was standing against a dynasty of deceit, a family that had built a portion of its fortune on the stolen hopes of the city's most vulnerable people. And she knew with chilling certainty that they would do anything to keep her silent. The chilling certainty didn't paralyze her, it galvanized her. Panic was a luxury, just like pride. Down here, in the silence and the dust, all she had was the truth, and the truth was a fragile weapon against a fortress of wealth and influence. Presenting a seating chart and a theory to Damien would be useless. He had already convicted her in his mind, swayed by fabricated evidence that played directly into his cynical view of the world. She needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be dismissed as the desperate fantasy of a disgraced waitress. She needed a confession. The idea was terrifying. It meant willingly walking back into the fire. She had to play the part they had written for her, the greedy, opportunistic gold digger. She had to make Victoria believe she had won, that Ilara was broken and ready to be bought. The first step was to open a line of communication. She spent the next day meticulously planning. Her sketchbook now filled with flowcharts and strategies instead of faces. Her only link to the world above was the stoic security guard who brought her meals. He was a man of few words, but she had noticed a flicker of something that wasn't contempt in his eyes. Maybe it was pity. She decided to risk it. The next time he delivered her tray, she slipped him a folded note, along with a $20 bill from the little cash she had left. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Just give this to Victoria Davenport's assistant. It's important." The guard looked from the note to her face, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a slow nod, he pocketed them both and left. The note was simple and carefully worded to sound desperate. "I know things that could be embarrassing, but I don't want trouble. I just want to take care of my sister and disappear. Name your price." Now, all she could do was wait and prepare. That evening, she requested the box of her personal effects that had been cleared from her desk. It was delivered without comment. Inside, beneath a spare sweater and some pens, was the small, old audio recorder. It was a cheap, plastic thing, its casing scuffed with age. She used to record herself reading stories for Lily, so her sister could listen to her voice when she had to work late shifts. The thought of using this object, a vessel of love and comfort, as a tool for subterfuge, felt like a betrayal, but it was all she had. She checked the batteries and tucked it deep into her pocket, its familiar weight a small, cold comfort. Floors above, Eleanor Sterling was also digging into the past. Frustrated by the lack of dirt on Ilara, her suspicion had turned inward, a compass needle swinging away from the easy target and toward a more uncomfortable direction. She started reviewing her mother's private correspondence, journals that hadn't been opened in years. She told herself she was looking for any mention of suspicious behavior from Arthur Albright, anything to corroborate a potential conspiracy. But deep down, she was looking for something else, an answer to the nagging inconsistency of Ilara's character. In a leather-bound journal from 25 years ago, she found it. Her mother wrote with passion about a new friend, a brilliant artist named Annalise, who worked as a cleaner in the hotel their family owned. "Annalise sees the world in a way I can only dream of," her mother had written. She designed the most beautiful floral pattern for the foundation's new logo, a swirl of lilies and vines. She says it represents hope growing in difficult places. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She remembered that design. It was on the foundation's original letterhead. before her father had it replaced with the sterile corporate S logo. The journal continued, the entries growing more distressed. Her mother wrote of her father's disapproval, of his fury that she was treating a member of the staff like an equal. The final entry on the subject was brief and filled with pain. Father dismissed Annalise today. He accused her of stealing a piece of jewelry. I know she is innocent, but he won't listen. He has erased her and a part of my heart from this family. Annalise, Ilara's grandmother's name. It all clicked into place. The locket. The girl in the basement wasn't a grifter. She was the heir to a forgotten friendship and a terrible injustice. 2 days after sending her note, Ilara received her reply. It wasn't written. The guard simply approached her and said, "Midnight, the old loading dock, level B4, come alone." Victoria had taken the bait. Arrogance, Ilara realized, was a powerful blindfold. Victoria was so certain of her superiority, of her control over the vast financial resources of her family, that she couldn't imagine a scenario where she wasn't the one holding all the cards. She saw a chance to tie up a loose end, to crush the little waitress for good, and secure her future claim on the sterling fortune. For Ilara, the message was a death sentence or her only chance at salvation. That night, as the clock ticked toward midnight, she clutched the small recorder in her pocket, its hard plastic edges digging into her palm. She was terrified, but beneath the fear was the cold, unyielding strength of someone with nothing left to lose. The loading dock on level B4 was a cavern of concrete and shadows, smelling of diesel fumes and decay. The only light came from a single, caged bulb that cast a sickly yellow glow, making the darkness at the edges seem deeper, more absolute. Ilara moved through the silence, her footsteps echoing unnervingly. Every scrape of her shoe sounded like a gunshot. She found a spot near a stack of old pallets, partially hidden but with a clear view of the entrance ramp. She pressed the record button on the device in her pocket. A tiny, almost invisible red light flickered once and went dark. It was active. Now, she just had to play her part. A few minutes past midnight, the purr of an expensive engine broke the silence. A sleek black sedan, its headlights cutting through the gloom like a predator's eyes, swept down the ramp and stopped. The engine died, plunging the dock back into near-total silence. The driver's side door opened, and Victoria Davenport stepped out. She was dressed in a sharp, dark pantsuit, looking as if she had just stepped out of a boardroom, not into a grimy basement. She scanned the area, her expression one of distaste, before her eyes landed on Ilara. "There you are," Victoria said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast, empty space. "I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve." She walked forward, her heels clicking on the oil-stained concrete. She stopped a safe distance away, appraising Ilara with a look of utter contempt. "You look terrible. Prison chic doesn't suit you." Ilara forced herself to look down, to hunch her shoulders, to project the image of a defeated woman. "I just want this to be over," she mumbled, her voice trembling just enough. "I want what you promised." Victoria laughed. A cold, sharp sound, always straight to business. "I suppose I admire that. It's what separates the winners from the losers in this world, the ability to see an opportunity and monetize it." She gestured back to the car. The passenger door opened, and a large man in a dark suit got out. He carried a heavy-looking silver briefcase. He placed it on the ground between them and then retreated to the car, a silent, menacing presence. $100,000, Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescension. "More money than you've ever seen in your life. Enough to pay for your sister's treatments and for you to disappear somewhere. Insignificant. All you have to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement and forget you ever worked at Sterling Enterprises." "And the flash drive?" Ilara asked, her voice small. Victoria's smile was predatory. "Oh, that little thing. My uncle was so worried about your proof, so dramatic, as if a few misfiled papers could ever challenge a fortune built over generations. a business empire with assets that dwarf the GDP of small countries. You were never a threat, Ilara. You were an annoyance, a gnat to be swatted. This was the moment. Ilara had to push her, to feed her ego. "You won't get away with it," she said, trying to sound both defiant and pathetic. "Damien will find out. He'll see the truth about the capital you've stolen." Victoria let out a genuine peal of laughter. "The truth? Oh, you sweet, naive child. The truth is whatever people like me say it is. Damien sees what I want him to see. He saw a greedy little waitress trying to extort him, and he believed it because it's what he expects from people like you. He lives in a world of complex investments, of stocks and cryptocurrencies, where everyone has an angle. It was easy to make him believe you were just playing your own pathetic little game." She took a step closer, her eyes glittering with malice. "You stumbled into a family business, that's all. A private fund my uncle and I have managed for years. A little extra dividend from the sterling legacy. It's nothing to them, a rounding error in their vast portfolio, but it's everything to us. It secures our position, our future. And you, with your pathetic sketchbook and your grandmother's locket, you almost ruined it." Ilara's heart pounded. She had mentioned the locket. "My grandmother," she started, "was a nobody," Victoria snapped. "Just like you, a cleaner who got too familiar and was put in her place. Some things are hereditary, it seems. A talent for being a nuisance." She kicked the briefcase lightly with the toe of her expensive shoe. "Take the money, Ilara. Consider it your inheritance. A severance package for a ghost. You sign the papers, you take the cash, and you vanish. If I ever see you again, if you ever breathe the names Sterling or Davenport, I will use the full weight of my family's wealth and influence to crush you. I will bury you in legal fees and false accusations until you and your sick sister are out on the street with nothing. Am I clear?" The raw, undisguised venom in her voice was chilling. It was more than Ilara had hoped for, a full confession, laced with threats and a complete admission of the frame-up. She looked at the briefcase, then back at Victoria's smug, triumphant face. She gave a slow, defeated nod. "Good girl," Victoria cooed. She produced a sheaf of papers and a pen from her jacket. "Sign here, here, and here." Ilara's hand shook as she took the pen. She scribbled a signature on the lines, not even reading the words. It was all part of the act. She handed the papers back. Victoria glanced at them, a satisfied smirk on her face. "Pleasure doing business with you," she said, the words dripping with sarcasm. She turned and walked back to her car without a backward glance. The large man remained by the door, watching Ilara, until Victoria was safely inside. Then he too got in, and the car started, its engine a low growl. It turned and sped up the ramp, disappearing into the city's night. Ilara was left alone in the silence, the sickly yellow light, and the lingering smell of exhaust fumes. She stood frozen for a long moment, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then, slowly, she bent down and picked up the briefcase. It was heavy, full of the dollars meant to buy her silence. But she didn't care about the money. Her hand went to her pocket, her fingers closing around the small, warm plastic of the audio recorder. She clutched it tightly, the simple device holding the weight of her future, her sister's health, and the truth of a decades-long deception. Leaving the briefcase of hush money on the cold concrete floor, she turned and walked back towards the service elevator, her steps no longer hesitant but firm and resolute. She was no longer a victim hiding in the shadows. She was a witness about to step into the light. Her first stop was not Damien's office, but Eleanor's. Armed with the recording and the story of her grandmother, Annalise, she found an ally who was already primed for the truth. Eleanor listened, her face a mask of controlled fury as the pieces clicked into place. The stolen legacy, the injustice done to her mother's friend, the corruption festering within their own foundation. Together, they planned their next move, not an attack, but a precise, surgical strike at the heart of the lie. The Sterling Hope Foundation's annual legacy ceremony was the glittering pinnacle of the city's philanthropic calendar. It was held in the very same grand ballroom where Ilara's ordeal had begun 1 month prior. The air was thick with the scent of expensive flowers and self-congratulation. Victoria Davenport and Arthur Albright stood on the stage, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlights, the picture of charitable grace. They were about to accept the Stewardship of the Year's award, the ultimate symbol of their successful deception. The Master of Ceremonies was lavishing praise on Albright's long years of service and Victoria's passionate commitment to the Foundation's mission. The applause was thunderous. As Arthur stepped up to the podium to begin his acceptance speech, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the room. "Stop!" All heads turned. Eleanor Sterling was walking down the center aisle, her expression unyielding. She moved with the powerful grace of a woman who owned not just the room, but the entire building. "Before we continue," she announced, her voice amplified by the microphone she took from a stunned stagehand, "there is a matter of a forgotten legacy that must be addressed, a story of true artistry and integrity that was buried long ago." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. On stage, Victoria's smile tightened, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Eleanor's diversion gave Ilara the opening she needed. She walked from the side of the stage, not in a waitress uniform, but in a simple, dignified dress Eleanor had provided. She held a small audio player connected to the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system. In front of hundreds of the city's most powerful people, she pressed play. Victoria's voice, sharp and cruel, filled the vast, silent hall. "You were never a threat, Ilara. You were an annoyance, a gnat to be swatted. You stumbled into a family business, that's all. A private fund my uncle and I have managed for years. It secures our position, our future." Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the carefully constructed facade. The recording played on a raw, unfiltered confession of embezzlement, blackmail, and breathtaking arrogance. The public humiliation was absolute and instantaneous. The color drained from Arthur Albright's face. Victoria stood frozen, her mask of sophistication cracking to reveal the raw ugliness beneath. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of her own recorded voice, damning her completely. Security quietly flanked the stage, and the dream of a vast inheritance, of a secured fortune, evaporated into a nightmare of legal consequences and public disgrace. Hours later, the ballroom was empty, a ghost of its former glory. Ilara stood on the exact spot where she had spilled the pitcher of water, the place where her world had shattered and, paradoxically, begun to reform. The polished floor reflected her solitary figure. "I owe you an apology." Damien Sterling's voice was quiet, stripped of its usual authority. He walked towards her, his expensive suit looking out of place in the empty hall. "I was wrong," he said, stopping a few feet away. "I was wrong to doubt you, wrong to trust the evidence of a lie over the truth of your character. I let my cynicism, my belief that everyone has a price, blind me to what was right in front of me." He looked around the room. This whole project of investigating the foundation, it was never about inefficiencies or optimizing the capital investments. It was about my mother. After she passed, I felt disconnected from her. The foundation was her heart, and I was trying to find it in the balance sheets, in the profit and loss statements. I was looking in the wrong place. His gaze fell to the sketchbook Ilara was holding. "Eleanor told me everything. About your grandmother, about this." He gestured to the book. Hesitantly, she opened it for him. He saw not just the sketches that had helped her solve the crime, but page after page of beautiful, compassionate drawings. He saw the faces of the people in the shelters, the children in the community centers, the life and hope that the foundation was supposed to nurture. And then he saw the last drawing. It was a stunning, Fully realized architectural design for a community arts center filled with light, color, and creativity. At the bottom, in small, neat letters, were the words, "The Annalise Vance Center for the Arts." "My mother always wanted to build something like this," Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. "A place where art wasn't a luxury, but a lifeline. She believed it could change lives." Ilara's life did change forever that night, but not with a fairy tale proposal or a blank check. Damien looked at her, not as a project or a problem, but as an equal. "The money Victoria and Albright stole has been recovered," he said. "It's a significant amount of capital, and it belongs back in the community. I want to build this center, Ilara, exactly as you've drawn it. And I don't want to hire you to work there. I want to partner with you. I want you to run it, to be its creative director." It was an offer not of charity, but of profound respect. It was the chance to build her own future, to honor her grandmother's legacy, and to turn her suppressed talent into a force for good. The final scene of their story wasn't a kiss in a glittering ballroom. It was them, weeks later, standing side by side on a dusty construction site, looking over the architectural plans for the new center. A team, forged in an accidental splash of cold water, ready to build something real, something with a value that could never be measured in dollars or stocks. Ilara Vance had faced down a billionaire's coldness and a rival's cruelty, and had emerged not with a man on her arm, but with her own destiny firmly in her hands, a future she had sketched into existence herself. What did you think of Ilara's incredible journey? Let us know in the comments below. If you were moved by her story of resilience and integrity, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching.